Please enjoy this uninterrupted conversation as part of our academic integrity series brought to you by Integrity for Education. Integrity for Education supports your institution by unlocking the full potential of digitalization through the right mix of software solutions, strategic consulting, and sustainable implementation of state of the art technologies. Learn more at integrityforeducation.de. That's integrity, the number 4, education.de. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. We are back on another episode of our academic integrity series, sponsored by Integrity for Education. And speaking of Integrity for Education, the CEO is not here. He usually is, Thomas, but he came later. But it's okay. We'll keep the party going. So let's get our guest, this first-time guest. Very excited about that. She is Kristine Goodwin, and she is, checked out this awesome title. She's a strategic project manager for the president at North Shore Community College. Kristine, how you doing today?
Very good. Thank you.
It's so nice to have you. I just got to say, we were just chit-chatting before I recorded. I'm from Lynn, Massachusetts. North Shore has a campus on Lynn, Massachusetts.
Yes, we do.
It's awesome. So tell us all about North Shore. Tell us about you. Tell us what you do, how you do it.
Sure, that's wonderful. So North Shore Community College is, like you said, it's primarily located in Lynn, Massachusetts, but we've also got a campus in Danvers, and we've got a big online presence as well. We serve the North Shore community in Massachusetts. It's a wonderful institution, and I mean that because I've come back to it for a second time and stayed. Spent the majority of my career in private 4-year institutions and, enjoyed that, but always felt drawn to the community college because my background, like I was telling you earlier, I'm from Lowell, Massachusetts, sort of first gen, born to teenage parents. My dad went to UMass Amherst while I was a kid, so we lived off campus. So I sort of started my life on a college campus. And he piecemealed together a degree over about 6-7 years. My mom never got her degree. So for me, higher education was not a question, right? I was going, right? That they were going to make sure I went. But I still just didn't know a lot, right? Because I didn't have, no one else in my family had gone. So felt first generation in many ways, particularly residential. So been a vice president, a chief experience officer. I've supervised, I think, almost every area of a college, from academic affairs as an assistant provost, VP for student affairs, like I said, chief experience officer, risk manager, and a lawyer by training as well. So to come back to North Shore in this role in particular feels like kind of like what I was meant to do. It's like the trifecta, right? Not only are we helping change the trajectory of the student's life, but their families and the community, right? And I take all of those other experiences that I've had at different parts of the institution, and I combine them at the service to the president. And he's a great president. I was there when he came in, and it's a pleasure working for him and doing this really important work in the community.
That's awesome. And one thing I want to dive in is a little bit. Tell the audience more about North Shore. What type of students? What's the makeup? What's the history? Tell us more about North Shore Community College.
Yeah, we are a Hispanic serving institution. We are a majority of first generation students. A lot of part-time students, older adults returning to higher education, as well as those coming right out of high school, and then also the dual enrollment or early college, right? So who isn't our student, is, I guess, the question I'd ask, right? And we have programs in everything from, nursing and all the way to aviation. We're putting out pilots, nurses, liberal studies transfers, STEM, human services. I mean, it's just funeral services. I was at their professional development last week, and I'm just always amazed at the resilience. I mean, most of our students are not just students, right? They're working, they're parents, they're siblings, they've got a lot on their plates, and yet they understand the importance of, again, continuing their education. So we did persona mapping last year and we couldn't do it. I mean, there's just so many different variables that matter. So for us, it's about how do we use technology to personalize the experience so that students feel like they belong, right? That they feel that sense of belonging, authentic belonging, we say, that they can navigate, the waterways. And again, we're North Shore, so it's a great way to talk about like momentum. Like we want them to feel a current that's sort of pushing them and helping them because we ultimately want them to excel. So we call that our BNE framework. But it's very personalized, which is really hard to do when you've got such a diverse student body.
Wow, that's great. And one of the things it reminds me of is that we had the president, Mark Miriron of National University on a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the Anders movement that they call. So basically, every student is and. So the
That's
student
right.
and a parent and a grandparent
Right.
and working. So it's the same thing. I love that concept. So
Yes.
let's get into the academic integrity component. So you've been around for in higher ed, right?
A
You
while.
haven't. I didn't want you said it.
Just
I
say
don't
a while.
say it. So now, obviously, with AI that's come in, tell us the AI story and academic integrity side of it that's happening at North Shore Community College. What's going on?
Well, I want to start out by saying, even though I've been in higher ed for a while, I'm an early adopter, right? I love AI. I've experimented with it. I've stopped saying please and thank you, although I was very polite user at first, but I've found out that that's, not effective.
That's awesome. Me too.
But
That's
yeah,
so
right.
funny.
One day I'm like, why am I doing anyway? So I'm an early adopter. I've been playing around with it. I think most recently I've really enjoyed the difference between sort of like a chat GPT where it's open and it takes everything from everywhere to Notebook LM, right? So I've just started using Notebook LM. And what I mean by that is I'm doing institutional learning outcomes, facilitating a process for our adoption of new institutional outcomes. And I wanted it limited to only those sources that we had already reviewed. And so, Notebook LM is great for that because
Yeah.
I can really narrow it. I can create some boundaries so that I'm not getting a lot of information that I haven't reviewed yet. So, and then I like Perplexity too. So when I think about AI and North Shore, in everybody that I've spoken to, students, faculty, staff, when it first came out, everybody went right to it thinking it's all for the same thing. And it's good or bad, right? Uh, and now I think we're beginning to realize that AI is a really big umbrella to lots of different tools and instruments. Um, again, I've been here for a while, right? I remember when like Google came out, right? And everybody was like, "Don't use Google. You can't cite Google. Google's not reliable." And listen, Google's pretty freaking reliable, but you had to know if it was reliable, and it took a while for it to work itself out. And I think similarly, my approach has always been we're not going to fight a tidal wave, right?
Hmm.
I think the idea is to figure out where we need to duck under and where we need to ride the wave and what we might need to rebuild sort of for the future of more things coming along because we just need to be agile, I think. And so our approach at North Shore has been to be agile but also to stick by the things that are most important to us. And academic integrity is one of those, right? The importance of citations, right? And watching AI battle with that, right? If people saying, wait a minute, you used my name, my voice without my permission. We're seeing that in AI, not just our use of AI. So having those conversations with students and faculty and staff and saying that these things are emerging and we're going to have to grapple with them academic integrity, citations, what's plagiarism, what isn't, what is common open source and what is, and when do I use it and when's it going to help my learning and when's it going to harm my learning? So I come down to this notion of personalization and asking questions. And you have to have a policy, right? I told you I'm a lawyer by training, right? So you got to have a policy. But I also think the policy has to be agile and it's got to explain why because people are more likely to follow a policy if they understand why.
And I love that you said that because again, we've been in this series with a bunch of different amazing leaders talking about academics, and the policy has come up And so talk us through that story when you said, "You know what? We need to put a policy in place." Did you get information from students? Did you
Mm,
talk to faculty? Did you talk staff? And
all
how
of
did you
the
come up with
above.
the policy? You know, and what's the reaction to the policy? I know it's liquid, obviously, right? It has to be fluid, right? But talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's all of the above, right? And I think again, the most important part of it though is that it's living and breathing and it's changing as we go. And that's why I'm a mediator by training. Okay, so there's a difference between a position and an interest, right? My
Mhm.
position might be as a faculty member, for example, no AI in my class,
Yes.
or my position might be AI, but you have to cite it. My position might be so a position is the ultimate policy, right? And so our policy and our policy's got to acknowledge the fact that different faculty are going to have different academic freedom, pedagogical choices. The ultimate thing here is learning, and so the faculty have to have the ability to make those choices in their classroom. So any policy we have has got to have faculty flexibility. So I'll start there, but it's also got to be interest based, not just position. So the interest is the why, right? So why is this the policy? Why am I going to use Notebook LM instead of ChatGPT or Perplexity or well, because it depends what I need and it depends what my output's going to be. So I've got to ask the questions about why am I using it? What am I using it for? Um, and then it's got to have that process, the analysis to it. So our policy asks a lot of questions like that. Like it says things like, what is the purpose of using the AI? Then this, then that. And again, we're not done yet. We still have a group working. And the group includes people from academic affairs and academics, curriculum policy, from IT, from Marcom, students. Like people are all weighing in, and we're vetting it with groups like our trustees and others. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I start thinking about is when I hear that, sounds like you all are in with AI and it's great. And it's like saying, use it, just be transparent about it. But it also sounds like in each faculty course, they can decide whether they want to use it per assignment. Cause I've been hearing a lot about that too. It's like, it depends on the assignment. And it's also like this red light, yellow light, red, green light kind of format that everybody's talking about. Is that something similar that's happening at North Shore? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say that's most important is clarity in explanation to the students about what is expected. And that's no different than other things that we do with students. Like we say them in this assignment, what can you and can't you do? Why? What are the expected learning outcomes in this assignment? Right? Like, when I was in law school, or I went to law school late in life, there were some faculty that said, use any source you want, right? Use the supplements, right? If they get you started, but you better read the case because I'll catch you, you know? But they would say, good. Some said, do not use supplements. If I find out you're using supplements. So it's the same thing. I mean, I know it's different because it can give a lot of wrong information if not done properly. It can really, it's hard to catch. Harder, for example, than perhaps some of the other things. Like if I didn't read a case, they'd pick something that didn't come up in the supplement, and they could know that I didn't do it. A little harder to do that with AI, right? Um, but again, I don't think this is as new to us as we are sort of reacting to it. So for us, it's for the faculty, it is clarity to the students. Because if you're not clear to the students what's expected of them, then shame on us.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've asked in the past, which I've thought about a lot, and I've gotten different responses. I'm curious to hear your response. Is that what about those students who are friends and they're taking the same course, different sections, and then one professor says, "Oh yeah, AI all the way, baby, let's go," and then the other professor says, "No AI whatsoever." Then there's two friends that talk to each other. It's like, hey, that's not, that's not. What do you say about that? I'm just
Mm.
curious.
I mean, again, I think that's the same. There's so many comparisons that you can make to that. Like,
Oh,
when students find out, what do you mean your books cost $500?
uh,
You had to pay. My faculty used open, access. I mean, so, life's not really fair. uh,
That's a good point. That's a good
we've
point.
sort of chosen, right, academic freedom and faculty curriculum choices, as being the priority. And students will figure out a way to, tell each other that information, right? I suspect some will share that on some of their online platforms about this faculty member doesn't allow AI, this one does. But for now, you just have to do what that particular faculty wants. Again, the advice I got when I was in law school from a judge was, "Don't fight with your faculty." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Wait a minute. I thought a lawyer fights. What do you mean?" And he said, "Listen, it'll be good practice for when you're before a judge." Um, and it was just, he's like, "Listen, get used to keeping your mouth shut sometimes, because most lawyers are fighters." And he's like, you got to know when to do what. And that's a life skill, right? Knowing that my different supervisors are going to have different expectations of me, different workplaces, different cultures. Like, I'm going to have to change the way I do things. You're going to have to change the way you do things.
I appreciate. No, I was gonna say I appreciate that response. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. I didn't think about it before, and I don't think anybody has ever mentioned that before. I want to talk about the the moment where you maybe you were hopefully you were there like a year ago, right? I think you've been there over a year,
Yeah.
where you were like, okay, what do we do about has the academic misconduct increased? Have you seen stats that say, oh, is it leveled off? Is it the same? And then what tools are we going to use to kind of figure out if we catch them, are we policing them, or we're going to try to be more proactive? Talk to us about all that.
Okay. So we have, having come from 4-year private, it is a real dramatic difference in the reduction of student conduct cases, both socially and academic.
Wow.
So we have a very small n. Like, there's not a lot of cases before now, and I don't anticipate in the future. I think that can be attributed, truthfully, to the ways in which our faculty work with students directly. They really do try to work with students before it becomes an academic dishonesty case or a behavior case. They really do try to educate students, and in part, I think that's also because a lot of our students aren't making these, aren't committing these things. They're a lot of times they're stumbling onto them because they didn't know. And when you go into it with that mindset, I think it's a really good mindset for everybody, truthfully, because I think I'd rather assume goodwill and miss a couple than assume bad will and catch people who didn't need to be caught. There was a
Mm.
great, Judge Caprio in Rhode Island was a national legend. He recently died. And if you've not listened to some of his stuff, as a judge, he would say that. He's like, listen, if I'm too lenient for a couple, better than for me to have been too. And as I'm not saying to compromise on education and learning, but most of the times in my life that I've learned was because someone explained to me what I did, why I didn't, why it would be better for me to do it differently. It wasn't because I was afraid and threatened. And so I just think that's our environment. Our environment is one of education. I think, again, our students tend to be, they're there for a reason. They're committed. It's a really an amazing community of faculty and students at North Shore, and I'm thrilled to be here. And that's why that question sort of took me by surprise, because I can remember sort of thinking that way, and I'm realizing, like, I don't think that way anymore, because it's just not the culture I'm working in.
So basically, it's the students, they have that intrinsic motivation, right, to want to learn and gain knowledge and use that in order to continue with their lives, better themselves, whether it's getting a
Right.
good job or further education. Is that part of it?
Right. And just don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're not using AI to write their English comp paper. Okay. I mean, that would be completely naive. But I think the difference is that our faculty would say to them, I suspect you used AI here. Let's really look at this, because it's not going to serve you well. Because here's what I need you to be able to learn and do. Let's try again. I suspect that's what our faculty are doing before it elevates to a place where we've got a case opened.
Speaking of the faculty, what are you hearing from the faculty? I know there's a lot of there's a lot of requests for more professional development. That's what I keep hearing. It's like, we need more professional development.
It's so funny, right? Because just like with everything, there are some real early adopters, people who are super creative, helping students write prompts. They're the believers who they're the people who believe that, AI is not going to replace people. It's going to replace people who don't know how to use AI, right? I mean, I've heard that so many times. So we've got some early adopters. I think we still have some faculty that don't even know what it is and haven't played with it. And
Mhm.
so, and again, some are doing the professional development on their own. I mean, there's certainly not lack of opportunities, right? You can ask AI to teach you how to use AI. um, so it runs the gamut of different places in which faculty are. But I do see them wanting to understand the different uses of the different types of AI, right? Like I spoke about the difference between Notebook LM and ChatGPT or Perplexity, and I think figuring out what you need when is really important. I will say one of the things that got quickly annoying are the audio and webinar things that Notebook LM will create
Yeah.
for you. I was like, "All right, everybody, time out, no more." Like, because it's just so I think there's some things that are so easy, but they wear on you pretty quickly, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, they're all asking for professional development, but different types of professional development, right?
Mm. Yeah, not it depends on obviously the discipline and all that stuff because some disciplines are all in, right? And then the other disciplines like, I don't think we need that right now.
Right, right,
Gotcha.
right.
So I want to talk about the tools that you use.
Yeah.
Are you using certain tools? Because you said faculty can tell. So are the classes small enough so that they're like they do like I've heard this too is like a writing assignment at the beginning, right? And then they test it later on. They try to find a way to say compare and say that's not your writing. I could just tell by reading it.
Yeah.
Or are they using tools to help them say, hey, this is AI?
I'm not certain, right, to be completely honest, but I will say, from my own perspective, I can tell the difference in my own writing, right? And I suspect, if I talk a certain way and then I write a different way, that would be one way to notice it. We use, Accuplacer and placement, Accuplacer for math and writing so we can sort of see samples. But I also think that there is the bolding, and I mean, there's ways that you sort of it just stands out and jumps right out at you. So I don't think our faculty are necessarily, you know, screening their stuff. I think it's more having a conversation with them about it. Um, and again, in some of the areas like STEM, you mentioned this, Elvin, right? So it's very different of like an English comp class, a journal, and a first year experience versus a lab report or a case analysis or in health studies. I mean, you can just see how different ways it'll emerge. So yeah, I don't know that I have not heard them talk about like, oh, here's the best thing to put it through like they used to for plagiarism. I'm not hearing that yet.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And one thing I wanted to again, I've done a bunch of these.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to just just get your feedback on because I'm very curious. So, what about this idea of, and I think you mentioned this actually, redefining academic integrity, redefining what it means to cheat, redefining plagiarism, right? I feel like we need to start doing that because of everything that's happening so quickly and with the advancements of technology seems as though, and we talked about this before, like I feel like I need to say, hey, hi, my name is Elvin and I use AI. It's almost like I gotta let people know and be transparent about that. But it's like, what are your thoughts about this whole redefining
Yeah.
these different terms? What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because I think with things like plagiarism, there's an industry standard, right? There's a universal understanding of plagiarism is not citing someone's work or taking someone else's work as your own.
Yeah.
And I think that translates to AI a bit. Although the difference with plagiarism is you're 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 just finding it. With AI, to find it, you have to do really good prompts. So you are engaging with it, I think, little bit more than you might be. You're changing the material. Not necessarily doesn't fully belong to somebody else. Like, and if so, who does it belong to? So I think those are some questions that we as an industry haven't answered yet. And until we do, I don't think we can have a definitive policy, except what I would say the policy should be is when there's a mismatch between what a faculty member expects and notifies students of and what students do. Do you see like to me that, and that's why I was focusing so heavily on the faculty member clearly communicating their expectations. Because listen, like I told you, I've been in this for 35 years. I've dealt with so many social dishonesty, academic dishonesty violations. And so many of them are that the student just didn't know. Now,
Yeah.
the argument will be, should they have known?
Mm.
And I think that's the double analysis. Did they know? Should they have known? Did they do it anyway? And I think it's clear that when they knew and they should have known and they did it anyway, you got an academic dishonesty case. Most of the other cases, I think we have to give some grace for the sake of learning. And listen, I'm not talking about lowering standards. Okay. I'm high standards, high support. But you're also going to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than somebody up on a soapbox, telling people, in my day. Again, I can say that because I've been in higher ed for a long time, and those words will never pass my lips.
That's great. One thing that made me think about is that high standards, we've heard a lot about that. It's like you have to raise the bar now because of AI, right? Let's raise the bar. Let's change how we assess and how we know that they've gained knowledge. And so, what are your thoughts about all of that conversation
Alvin,
going on?
I would love if AI generates a conversation about that because I've been asking that question for lots of other reasons for years, right? What are the multiple ways to assess learning? And I think, if our pedagogy, first of all, our pedagogy has to match our outcomes, but so does our assessment, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are we assessing a certain way, right? And again, I think I want to bring up like universal accommodations or universal accessible classrooms, right? When we have more students, well, we have reports of more students requiring accommodations. At what point do the exceptions swallow the rule? And do we have to start changing the way we teach and the way we assess and evaluate? Right? I mean, so to me, it's time to rethink evaluations to match that which we're trying to teach. So we were talking earlier about learning outcomes, things people need to know, but also skills and competencies, things that people need to be able to do. And then life expectations, what they should expect as a result of this experience in terms of a good life, right? Gallup, the Gallup survey, the alumni survey talks about great jobs, great lives. Um, and if we can keep focusing on that, that's the common end game with students, that we're all on the same team, right? We're all looking for you to have a great job and a great life. I think we can handle things like academic integrity, high standards, high support, better evaluations versus like breaking people, right? Not to go off on something, but I can remember back when my son was in middle school and I was on the school committee. Suddenly, everybody was doing binder checks. Did you ever have a binder check? You
Yeah,
had
I did.
to show that your binder was organized, right? And they put that in the grade. So my son was like an A student in math, and he gets a C in math. I'm like, what is this? And they were like, his binder was very messy. He failed all of his binder checks. And I said, listen, I love that you're teaching organization, but I don't want that in his math grade because I want to know, does he know math? Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to add an organization grade, add the organization grade. So it's just one of those examples of make sure that your evaluation is actually evaluating what it is so that the student is good, because evaluations are messages. We've got to stop thinking of them as judgments. They're messages. It's a message to the student if you did well or you could have done better, or it's standards. Think about it like in a job performance, right? It should be telling me like where I could grow and what it's not this judgment. And I think that's the root of some of this, right? That the root of this is if you see academic integrity as like protecting the coop, right? Of protecting this thing, I think you missed the point. I think you missed.
Yeah, I love that. The messaging against all that, and that's fantastic. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that one from you, Kristine.
It's all yours. You don't even need to cite it.
I love that. That's great. It's such a fun conversation. We'll get into the end. So, Kristine, tell us what's the future of higher education, and if you want, you could add the academic integrity piece to it. So, what are your thoughts?
Uh, who knows? No, I'm kidding.
That's the right answer. Episode over.
You know, I think I hope that the future of academic integrity is this engagement with students about what it means to be a person with integrity. I mean, if we start there with the interest, right? If what I'm trying to teach are for people to have integrity, to tell the truth, then that's the goal. How do I get there is really the question for people who'll be in higher ed longer than me.
That's awesome. I love it. Such a great, fun conversation. Thank you so much, Kristine.
Same.
This has been
Loved it.
amazing. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, so we always
Awesome.
appreciate everyone who comes on. And everyone's
Mhm.
super busy in higher ed. Especially in higher ed, you got to wear multiple hats. So I totally understand. I totally get that. So
It's a lot
I'm
of
gonna say
fun.
I'm gonna outro you properly, ladies and gentlemen. She is Kristine Goodwin, and she is the strategic project manager for the president at North Shore Community College. Kristine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp. Thanks for listening to this uninterrupted conversation as part of our academic integrity series brought to you by Integrity for Education. Integrity for Education supports your institution by unlocking the full potential of digitalization through the right mix of software solutions, strategic consulting, and sustainable implementation of state-of-the-art technologies. Learn more at integrityforeducation.de. That's integrity, the number 4, education.de.